First up on the list, and probably the most important if you are using building plans, that would be to verify all of the measurements. And I know that sounds like a no-brainer. Oh yeah, that's right. Or it might sound like, wait a minute, I paid a professional architect to draw these plans and it cost me $40,000. Everything should be right. Well, you're absolutely right. It should be, but it might not be. And that's the problem. Double check the measurements pertaining to all of the walls above and below. Double check and make sure the length of the stairway is actually going to fit in here. I can't tell you how many times I came to a project like this and the architect might have had a 109-inch total overall floor height difference. The measurement between the bottom level and the upper level, let's just say, was 109 inches, when in reality it was 112 inches. So this would have changed the step or the riser and then made me add another step because it wouldn't have fell into the local or met local building codes. So double check all these measurements. And I will put a link here for those interested in. I actually have another channel that I'm taking apart this house right here and showing you step by step. I'll put a link here to the stairway part of that video. Number 2 on the list, and this is probably one of the biggest mistakes professional stair builders make. They do not pay attention to the details. And again, if you're a perfectionist, you are going to be paying attention to the details. This was a lesson that it took me probably 2 or 3 years to get to realize how important it was. And that is that if you want your stairs to start and stop at an exact point, then each one of these treads need to be laid out accordingly. So here we have 7 treads and we have a 70-inch measurement. And if I was to lay each one of these out at 10 inches, I'm not going to have a problem. It's going to stop right on the money. If one of these is a 1/16 of an inch longer, or a 1/16 of an inch shorter, or a combination of both, a 1/16 of an inch longer, and then an 1/8 of an inch shorter, an 1/8 of an inch longer, an 1/8 of an inch longer, something like that, we're going to get some wacky measurements. So each one of these treads and risers needs to be laid out precisely, exact measurements. If you are dividing 5 foot, if we have 5 foot and we have 8 risers, we divide this into here, we're going to get 7.5 inches for each one of the risers. We need to lay them out at 7.5 inches, not 7 5/8, not 7 3/8, not 7 5/8 on one and 7 5/16 on another one. Each one of these needs to be exactly the same. And on longer stairways, it's going to be even a bigger problem. Number 3 on our list will be adjusting and compensating for building materials at the bottom and top of your stair stringers. And again, you're going to have to do this when you're laying out the stair stringer. So if I don't subtract the thickness of the tread off of the bottom of the stringer, I'm going to end up with a taller riser overall. So we've got to subtract the thickness of the tread off of the bottom of the stringer. And again, I'm just saying it. I'm not going into a lot of detail. I do have other videos on that. I'll try and find a link and put it here. And then of course the top. If you are going to add a riser, put a riser on here, everything will work out. But what if I wanted to butt the stringers, connect them to the concrete, and then have this be my last tread and then use the concrete as the face of my riser? I would just need to deduct the desired amount off of the stringer. Now, what if I wanted to add a ledger? If that's the case, I would just simply deduct whatever I needed for the ledger off of the stringer and then make sure that everything is going to work out accordingly. And here's what it would look like after I deducted 3/4 of an inch off of the bottom of the stringer. 6 3/4 of an inch provides us with a 7.5 inch finished riser, which would provide us with the same equal measurements for each part of the stairway. Number 4 on our list is another problem that most people don't even think about, and that will be the different size materials that you are going to use if you are going to use them at the bottom or throughout the stairway and of course the top. So if I go ahead and put an inch thick tile on the bottom and then put a 1/2 inch thick material over my stairway like this, I'm going to end up with a 7-inch riser at the bottom, and then the rest of these will be 7.5 inches, and the same thing at the top. Now if I'm going to use the same material throughout the stairway, let's say I'm going to carpet this area, everything's going to get the same carpet. I'm not going to have a problem. Everything should work out. But if you are going to use a thicker or a thinner material, either at the bottom or the top or on top of the stairs, you're going to have to compensate for those materials when you're laying out your stair stringers or building your stairs. Next up on the list, number 5, and this mistake right here will prevent you from wasting lumber, because what you're going to do is lay out a stair stringer and then cut it. And again, you could probably do this too by just laying it out and cutting the bottom and cutting the top and double checking everything. But if you lay out the stair stringer and you cut it, put it into place, put it into the position where it is going to go in the building. And then simply double check everything. Make sure that all the steps are level. The risers are plumb if they're not going to have an undercut on them. And then make sure all of these measurements work out. Make sure that you've allowed for the ledger. Measure everything and double check it 25 times if you have to. Now, this is where you're going to notice if you did not use precise and exact measurements. So let's say that you divided everything up and you come up with our riser height of 7 9/16, but you made the riser 7.5 inches. That's going to create a tread that's not going to be perfectly level or perfectly flat. And of course, this is where you will see it. If you put the level on here and it's off just a little bit, I would recheck everything, measure your riser, measure the riser height and the tread width to make sure that everything is proportionately accurate, or as accurate as possible. I mean, if you're off a 1/16 of an inch throughout the entire measurement here, this should be right on. It should be close enough. You know, if you put the level on here and this thing is sloping down 1/8 of an inch, you might want to recut the stringer. If it's sloping up 1/8 of an inch, you might want to recut the stringer. If you only have a couple measurements that are off by a 1/16 of an inch, you might just leave it, and that's going to be close enough. So anyway, that is it for the video. Hope that you got something out of it, even if you just learned one thing out of it that prevented one of these mistakes from happening. You are going to benefit from the time you spent watching it.